Interested in military service? Want to know what it's like to be in combat? What and how people respond when they are under the greatest stress imaginable? To have to confront your shadow, and then what it's like to come home and reintegrate into what we call normal society? Well, if you do, this is the interview for you. Welcome to Northern Vibe. Thank you very much for tuning in. If we've never met, I'm Matt Maloney, host and founder of Northern Vibe. Northern Vibe believes in elevating the obscure. We believe in exposing excellence. We believe in cultivating curiosity, acknowledging achievement, and shining a light on uniqueness. We engage in open conversations with those who have hidden talents, abilities, and accomplishments. And I'm speaking to a very accomplished man tonight. We seek to understand interesting and informed people, to comprehend and appreciate motivation. So listen in, eavesdrop. Everybody wants to grow. Northern Vibe is growing, but we really need your help to keep up that momentum. So please like and share. If you haven't already done so, jump on, follow Northern Vibe. We have a lot of interesting guests there. Go back through our old interviews. You'll find some very interesting interviews there. We're getting some really interesting locations where people are listening from. So a big hello to Galway over in Ireland, my old mother country. So fantastic to see you guys there. And we're getting some great suggestions from the comments pages. So please keep them coming. And this includes suggestions for guests. Now, if you're interested in coming on Northern Vibe, contact me through the Facebook page. I'll be doing a very brief bio for Rob. You'll find out about him through the interview. But first, this week's Mention in Dispatches. Now, Rob has given a really, I've got to say, I quite like this. I quite like this charity. He has nominated Empower Assistance Dogs. So, Empower Assistance Dogs, as the site says, they provide a quality of life and independence of people with disabilities by providing professionally trained and government certified guide, hearing and assistance dogs. Now, if you want to assist them, just don't hesitate to get on the website. As you can see there, it's empowerassistancedogs.org.au. They have about us events and how you can assist there. So I've got to say, that's a very interesting charity that he's chosen there. Now, about Rob. Rob has 16 years of service with the Australian Army as an infantryman. He's had operational deployments to East Timor in 2003, Timor Leste in 2005, Baghdad, Iraq in 2007, Afghanistan in 2009 and 10, as well as training missions to Malaysia and Europe. After leaving the military, he established the Cairns branch of the charity Mates for Mates, which he has developed and grown for 2 years, but now he's moved over to the RSL. He now works in Toyota for sales, as well as sitting on the board of the RSL. I'm really to have him here. Welcome, Rob Lee.
Thank you, Matt.
Mate, it's great it's really great to have you here. And you know, one of the things I kind of want to do, and I know it's going to make you feel a bit weird, but you know, thanks very much for your service. Seriously.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it.
Well, it's the day after Anzac Day, and we, you know, as a country, we hold the service and sacrifice that our servicemen and women have made really highly. But mate, let's get into the interview. Tell me about you.
About me, I don't know, I fancy myself a little bit unremarkable, but North Queensland boy through and through. So I was born up here in North Queensland, in Ingham actually, a small town called Ingham. And grew up in Townsville, then got posted back to Townsville once I joined the army. And joined the army, went where you said, and now I'm here. Is that a good bio?
Oh, mate, that's fantastic. And I just by way of explanation to our guests out there, I've only spoken to Rob a few times before the interview, but he's a very modest chap, and so he kind of doesn't like talking himself up. So I'm going to be twisting his arm a little bit. But mate, I understand that you you do come from, you've got a fair bit of Maltese in your background.
Yeah,
I've got a lot of Maltese, mate. The As a Party family is pretty big up here, and I'm acquainted with a couple of them.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few Maltese families here and there, but yeah, come from a big Maltese family out of Ingham. Mm. So yeah.
So mate, you're working in sales now.
Yeah, a little bit of a difference between sales and being an infantryman in Afghanistan, I guess. But yeah, that's one of the difficulties, as you're saying, transitioning from civilian life to military life, is one, getting employment. And I know myself and a lot of people I know found that was a little bit of an issue, because although you're very well trained and you can use 100 different guns, it's not really important to any civilian bosses how many weapons you can use or how many push-ups you can do. It's all about how you operate. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do anything that the people want you to do, as in prospective employers, but you don't necessarily come away from the army with the civilian recognition that you sort of need, in my opinion, anyway.
No, I think you're quite right. And actually, we've already gone off my structured interview format, and I always come to this because I've got a couple of people who watch my interviews and thank you. They know who they are and they always give me feedback. I sincerely appreciate it. And one of the common ones that's made is like, do you actually have an interview structure, Maloney? Really? I assure you I do. But I think we'll dive into that. And to give some background, I was lucky enough to go, as you listeners will know, I'm just coming out of the Queensland Police Service. And I was lucky enough to go to America for a study trip, not with the police. I won a Churchill Fellowship, and I was studying. I worked a fair bit with a couple of young Afghanistan veterans, and like, you know, I was talking to one of them, and everywhere you go in America, at the airports and everything, it's kind of like our thing with the recognition of people. Like, you go and say, we want to recognize, you know, our servicemen and women. Thank you very much for your service. Everywhere you go, like seriously, you know, there's pictures and everything like that. And so I'm talking to this young Marine, and I said, mate, that must be kind of cool, like having that. And he goes, it's token. I said, oh, what do you mean? He goes, look, I'm really happy in the police now. Like, I actually wouldn't do any other job. But when I came back, and he articulated almost exactly what you did. He said, I'm super fit. I know what to do in a stressful situation. I know how I'll act. I can keep my calm. He said, funnily enough, I'm actually not a bad communicator, because I had to learn that. He learned a bit of no, it wasn't Farsi. I think he learned a bit of, no, it was. He learned a bit of Farsi when he was over there in Afghanistan. He goes, look, I've got this skill set, and everybody, like, I'd turn up, they'd see on my resume, oh, mate, you've just come back. I go to job interviews and people would say, thank you very much for your service. And then they'd kind of like shake your head. And it's like, this isn't for you. And to add to that, because there's so much talk, and, you know, we're going to discuss it and it's real, there's a lot of talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. There's this immediate assumption. He articulated that there's this immediate assumption on behalf of employers that, like, oh, everyone comes back as, you know, they've got some sort of problem, and I don't want to take them. Thanks very much for your service, but I'm not going to give you a job. So that is a bit of an issue with the troops coming back home.
Yeah, it's something I did experience, troubles getting paid employment, I guess, from civilian employers, and I don't think it was necessarily that. It could have been, but I think personally, from my experience, is that they, on paper, I didn't sort of come across as the best candidate, I guess, because my life experience, or my experience up until then, was with the military, and there's nothing I could sort of, you know, that's just how I felt anyway. But yeah, I could imagine that that'd definitely be a prospective employer's thoughts, the PTSD thing and all the rest of it.
Yeah, but it was more the skill set thing that this young Marine was talking about. Yeah, and he kind of said, look, it's funny. Although it actually didn't suit the police specifically, he goes, and he actually made the analogy too. He goes, look, you know, policing has also taught me that I know that I've got all these skill sets, but you haven't got a piece of paper to recognize them. You know, like, I know there is courses out there now with conflict resolution and stuff like that, but you've got to do like, you know, it's what the police do. And I know there is, and who values staying cool under pressure? Like, you know, these kind of things aren't articulated all that well. So you come out with these magnificent skills that are right up here, but if you're looking for something else, like, it's like you, yeah, it's kind of odd. But no, look, could you tell us about your service?
Yeah, so as you briefly touched on there, I've been in the military for 16 years, had a ton of deployments, started off in East Timor in 2003, moving on to Timor Leste in 2005, then Iraq 2007, and Afghanistan 2009, 2010. All in between there, obviously, there was training missions and all sorts of things that did with the military. So I spent a lot of time away, which can be problematic for family life. I did have a significant other through most of my service, but unfortunately, I got divorced after Afghanistan, which is not rare amongst veterans or serving army people, military, basically. We used to joke amongst ourselves that it was the first subject, so the military, we call them subject courses. So subject 1 is the first course for getting divorced is subject 1 for sergeant. Yeah, a bit of a sick joke, but anyway. Yeah, so I've done that. And, yeah.
It's like in the police. We used to joke. There's key essential criteria you got to fulfill to be a sergeant, senior constable, and that sort of thing. The joke used to be KSC, key essential criteria for sergeant, was must be divorced at least once, have a serious alcohol problem, maybe a gambling issue. Like there's all these, yeah. there's all these boxes you got to tick. Oh, by the way, you got to be able to do a little bit of major incident stuff and maybe lead people on that. That's kind of handy as well.
Yeah, that's it sounds very, very similar.
Yeah, but the real stuff is like, how'd you go through your divorce? Civilians and including people like me and stuff like that, we really do admire. Like, it's quite serious. We really do admire what you do, and it fascinates us. Like, there's a reason that movies today, well, pretty much all movies everywhere, are made about some sort of conflict, and disproportionately military. Army movies, because we come to understand ourselves, and there's the highs and the lows. So it's a real test of character. Mate, can you tell me about a high?
Yeah, I was just thinking about a couple instances overseas that were sort of major. So yes, a high. So my first deployment was East Timor, 2003. I was 19, 20, I guess. And although I was in an infantry section, each one of us has a little bit of an extra job to do. So my extra job was first aid. So I'm not a medic or anything. I've just done a 2-week course that makes me a little bit better than the next guy. And that's, treating for first aid, heat illnesses, gunshot wounds, stuff like that. So yes, that's the training I had. So we're in Timor, we moved into Ballabo, into the mountains, into this little village. There was a clinic set up by this African guy. So he was an African doctor. He was educated in the UK. He was from the Congo, I think, originally, educated in the UK, then moved to Australia, and now he was in East Timor, working for Médecins Sans Frontières, I think. I think that was organizational or something similar. Anyway, he was there running this clinic. The clinic was a burnt out building, probably a regular 4-bedroom house size, I guess, that had been burnt out. It had been sort of half refurbished, so that, half refurbished, I guess. The toilet was overflowing in a lot of the rooms. There was, it was just a mess. But this doctor had set up with his wife. He lived next door to the clinic, and he said, hey, look, you guys have been somewhat trained in medical stuff. Perhaps I can teach you a few things and you can help us out with some manpower. So there was 3 of us, 3 medics, 3 first aiders there. And we said, yeah, cool, no worries. So all the medical issues that he had to do, or medical things that he had to do, he'd try and educate us in it. So one of the things was inoculation. So he had to give out inoculations to a certain percentage of the village, and he could do that. He got us up and we helped out and blah, blah, blah. But there was also things that he done medically that he said, look, there's some serious stuff that I do here. You guys can come along and learn a few things. I'm like, yeah, cool. Yeah. But there was there was three specific instances that I remember that really, I think, changed the way I thought about the third world. I thought about military. I thought about life. The first one was a dad and a son had walked into the clinic. Dad looked like he was about 105. He would have been about 50, but he looked like he was about 105, had a hard life. And the son was about 9, but he looked like he was about 5 because nourishment and all the rest of it, they don't grow quick, unfortunately. And the kid had a cut on his leg from the bottom of just below his knee, on the outside of his shin bone. He had a cut from just below there all the way down to just about his ankle, probably about an inch deep. So you could literally see his bone. And there was maggots through it. It was a filthy wound. It was septic. It wasn't good at all. It looked like he needed to get his leg chopped off. So dad and son had rocked up to the clinic, and dad said, "Yep, can you fix my son?" And there was me and the doc there, and the doc started going nuts, saying, "Why haven't you, like, this leg needed attention days ago? Why didn't you come in?" He said, "Oh, look, we were working in the field, and as soon as my son cut his leg, we started walking here." And we were like, "What?" And he said, yeah. When was that? And it turned out he started walking 4 days ago. Like, he walked his son 4 days to get to this clinic, to get his leg treated. You're just like, holy shit, man. This is different. This is different. So that's one thing that I looked at, just thought, man, this guy's walked, for 4 days to get his son treated. And the son, get this, when his son, we got him up on the bench, and we had dad sitting next to the kid, and the kid sitting there, and we're cleaning out his wound. Now, you could imagine an open wound, when you pour even water on it, it friggin' hurts. Like, It's an open wound. We were pouring antiseptic on it, and it was heavy duty antiseptic. It wasn't like any sort of, I don't know, good antiseptic, I guess. Cleaning out the wound and all the dead flesh. As soon as we poured it on there, the kid flinched a little bit. The dad looked at him, didn't say anything, just looked at him, and the kid just looked at his dad and just sat there for the rest of, it was about an hour while we cleaned it up, just sat there, like, not crying, not speaking, not doing anything, just copping it. We're just like, shit, man. Like, there is no kid that I've met here in Australia that would be able to do that same thing. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that was one instance. Yeah.
That's great. And look, that's same level. But I lived in Outer Mongolia for a little while, and the town I lived in was a place called Dakhan, and I went to Ulaanbaatar, which is the capital, and it's proper third world Mongolia. And I'm going for a morning walk one day, and it was actually in early spring, but it was still around about 0 degrees in the morning Celsius, and at night it was 10, maybe 15 below. So, like, if you're outside, you died. And all the homeless people there, and there were lots. You could tell the drunks. You could tell, like, the proper homeless drunks. They all had, like, no noses, no ears, no. Yeah, because they get drunk, fall asleep.
Fall asleep and frostbite. Shit.
Yep. Now, all the drains are full, because with all the drains leading up to the big buildings, it gets seriously cold in Mongolia during the winter. It gets up to 40 at night, like it gets like 40 below zero, and that's cold. Like, that's ridiculously cold. So they have all the hot water and stuff through there, and that's how people kept warm.
Yeah.
And I'm walking down the street, and there's this manhole cover there. The steam's coming out of the manhole cover. And it was like a movie. Next thing, this manhole cover, like, pops. I'm like, what the? Done the big double take. I'm looking at this manhole cover, moves aside, and all these kids come. It's actually kind of sad. All these kids just start coming out, Rob. And there was like 8, 10, these kids that are kind of coming out, and they are dressed like scarecrows. There's just nothing there. And I'm like sitting there doing that. Like, just looking at these kids coming out, and they are, and you could tell, and you've seen malnutrition. You can tell when people suffering from malnutrition, they get, all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, look at these kids. And of course they see this blue-eyed, red-headed, clearly foreign guy sitting there with his slack-jawed, looking at them. They come running up and, have you got any food and stuff like that? And I was kind of thinking, man, God alone knows what. And there was some really young kids there. Like some of them were like 8, 10. And there was some like older kids there that were like, 16. Like, God alone knows what was happening under those streets at night, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, some pretty serious exploitation. Like the things that we take for granted over here and the lack of resilience we have as a people, like the first world problems we whine about, it kind of like, we just harden up and stop?
First world problems. That's it. Yeah, you've hit it on the head. That's another, I think that's bloody 30% of any veteran's difficulty moving into civilian life is the first world problem. Seeing white Australians, well, not necessarily white Caucasians, just Australians in general, just whining because of, maybe they're, I don't know, cheeseburger isn't hot enough or something. It just drives you freaking crazy.
Yeah, that's it too. Like, and I've worked quite a bit in the Indigenous space and continue to do so. And don't get me wrong, like Indigenous disadvantage compared to the Australian thing, again, because it all depends on what your benchmark is, eh? Anytime we talk about disadvantage or suffering or anything else like that, it's like, well, what's your benchmark is the first question. And for Australians, it's real, but like I'd have these conversations and I still have these conversations. This is probably going to get me in trouble at work, but I don't care because it's true. I'm just going to defend it.
Yeah, I love you getting in trouble.
yeah. Oh man, like it's kind of
it's going to be a cracker.
It's situation normal. Anyway, I was having this discussion, and it wasn't at my new work. It was actually outside in another. Anyway, so I'm having this discussion, and and this person goes, "Oh, Indigenous, poverty," and I went, "Well, there's Indigenous disadvantage over here, and there's Indigenous people, generally speaking, are poorer than mainstream society, but there's no real poverty in the truest sense of the word." And this person nearly fell off the chair and they're throwing their stuff down and like the how dare yous and all the recriminatory sort of stuff. And I went, no. I've seen poverty, and I relayed the story that I just relayed to you. I've seen starvation. The biggest killers, one of the biggest diseases that kills Indigenous people is diabetes. That is not a disease of poverty. That's a disease of excess. That's too much. That's not enough. The problem isn't I haven't got enough. Like scurvy is like, I don't have enough. Malnutrition is, I don't have enough. When you got diabetes, that's like, dude, I got way too much. I got way too much. And again, it's not just an Indigenous thing. It's like, look at obesity rates and look at everything else that's going on in Australia right now. It's the sort of wimpy first world problems that we have. But look, so that was a high. You got to help that, that was a world expanding kind of thing. You got to see this thing and you got to help this young fella out. Mate, are you happy to tell us about a low?
Yeah, I've been trying to rack my brain for a low, to be honest. So spoiler alert, Matt sent me out a ton of questions that he potentially could ask me, and I read over them all, and I had no problem with them all except for a low. And I couldn't really think of one, and I don't know why that was. You would think going on deployments to all these nasty places, there'd be tons of lows, which there were, but they weren't the forefront. They weren't memories that I first went to, sort of thing, which sounds a little bit weird, I guess. But yeah, I think my biggest low was just being by myself at times. Like, although you're always with the army unit and you're always, you're never truly by yourself, which is another frigging pain in the ass about being on deployment. But yeah, just when you are by yourself, I don't know, sitting, eating your meal or something like that, just thinking back to home and just thinking about the time that's expiring while you're over here. It just feels like the whole world continues without you while you're on deployment. It's
kind of funny. I think I have some understanding, and I'm going to put it in context for you. The people that used to live over in our back veranda. I spent the last couple of years in my high school at Bundaberg. So, g'day to Jason Steyer and and the you know, I know there's quite a few Bundaberg guys listen, so you know, g'day to Jason Steyer, Mark Dinsey, and everybody else. Oh, I got some questions for you too that are starting to come up, but I'll tell this quick anecdote first, and then I'll hit you with the questions. So his name was Wallace Adams, and he married Phyllis Adams, who was an English woman. She lived through the Blitz. Like, she was in the East End of London, just getting hammered. And he was a tail gunner in Lancasters. Your average tail gunner survived for 7 missions. He did a full tour over Germany, and won the DFC right towards the end of the war. And you know, the stuff that they were winning DFCs for at the end of the war was like military, like was, you know, because people kind of had normalized so much. It's like stuff that was winning you just a DFC. It was like, that probably would have won you something higher earlier in the conflict, you know. And they always spoke, indicating that it was a terrible time, but they had meaning, and they had point, and they had focus, and they had a mission, and having that meaning and point at the center of their lives gave them this. It's like for them, everything else was a bit of a downer. You know what I mean? Like, that was the time. Those 6 years for them was their time, and that's when they just had to do kind of stuff. And everything that they did was always going to be compared to that, because everything in peacetime and civilian time was after that. Even Phil, his wife, who never actually saw combat, but like kind of the violence and terrible stuff she saw in the bombings, or the stories she used to tell about being bombed out of her house. Like, she got so used to being bombed that Hankel's apparently had 8 bombs they could, like, in the racks. So they'd count them, you know what I mean? And oh yeah, you get to know the distance. Yeah, that's going to blow up there. It's going to blow up there. It's going to blow up there. One of the bombing raids started. She was in the bath and went, you know what? I want a bath. I don't care. The house ended up getting bombed, and she was she was up there for hours and hours, and she had to get this fireman had to come up and rescue her while she was in the nude, and she had to, you know, so these English guys are like trying to hand the towels over. And that was just one of the stories that they kind of told. But look,
I can relate to that. Like, I have an almost identical story before you go into those questions.
Yep.
In Iraq, we got indirect every second day, or sometimes 6 times a day. So indirect is mortar fire or rockets, you know, set off at another location to hit what was then the IZ, the international zone in Baghdad, to kill, you know, Americans, Australians, whoever. There was one time we were going on, so that had happened so often, it was crazy. And there would be an air raid siren that would go off when the bombs are coming in. You're supposed to, the drill was you have to run to a hard standing in the covered area. So there's cement boxes everywhere around the base. You run there and you sit there until the bombs stop, and then you go about your business. And I got to the end of my tether. I was about 2 months into the deployment. I was just like, what's to say? Because these rockets would land anywhere. Mortars would land anywhere. They were unguided, and, you know, it was like random as hell. So it was my way of thinking, like, these rockets are coming in. If I run to that shelter, if a rocket, to give you a good understanding, if a rocket hit one of those shelters that I was talking about, you'd be dead anyway. They just give you a little bit of extra protection. And I thought to myself, like, why am I going to run to this bunker when, like, I could be running to where a rocket's going to hit? Like, why am I running? Yeah. Like, it's silly. It's silly to run. So I stopped running, and I just walked back and went about my business. Unfortunately, the CEO of the battalion actually seen me do this, and he lost his mind. I got in a fair bit of trouble for not protecting myself, which is a duty of the Australian soldier, to protect themselves. So even though I wasn't enough to protect myself, my boss was.
That's great. Mate, one of the questions, I got my mate Mark Dinsey, who's another Bundabergie, and g'day Sparkles. He's a parent. And his question is, as a parent whose son is in the 2nd year in the infantry, what advice would you give him? And then I got a follow-up question from my mate Topher McLaughlin.
That's interesting. 2nd year in the infantry. What advice would I give? He's been there 2 years. I don't think he needs any advice. I think you learn all that you need to learn within the first 6 months of coming to a battalion. You learn a lot about yourself as well. Sure, he's got a lot of growing to do, and has done a lot of growing since he joined there. I'll just
so get out now is not some of the advice. Get out now.
No. It could be some advice from some colleagues, former colleagues, but no, just keep on keeping on. If you like it, do it. If you don't, get out.
All right, and my mate Chris McLaughlin said, "Are you happy to talk about the Black Dog depression? Obviously, what's your take on it?"
Absolutely, but you have to let me know why he's called Sparkles first.
Oh, did he? Oh, because he's like when he used to play, because he was back at Bundaberg, he used to play rugby league, and apparently he was all right. I never saw him, but his playing style was like Sparkles McGraw, the rugby player from the late 80s, early 90s. So, yeah.
I like it.
That's what I was told.
So the Black Dog is, definitely a big thing amongst returning veterans. For those of you who don't know, that's a slang term for depression, which is a side effect of PTSD and many other things, of course. But yes, I do suffer from depression. I was diagnosed with PTSD, major depression, and a few other psychological injuries, I guess. Injuries, I don't know if that's the right term, but yeah, it is something that I suffered from for a long time. And that's part of the reason why I started the Mates charity, the branch of Mates here in Cairns, is because there is many return servicemen that aren't getting the service or the treatment or attention that they need.
So I'm just showing the Mates for Mates site out there. So no doubt there's going to be a lot of veterans who are going to tune into this. You probably would have heard about it, but if you haven't, Mates for Mates, so MATES 4 numeral, mates.org. There's to get help. Obviously, it's veterans focused, ways to support, all that sort of stuff. So Rob recommends it. It's got to be good. So yeah, all right, mate. Well, I suppose that kind of leads into what was it like coming home? Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, that's a big thing, coming home, and it's something you're not sort of. So, because I was in for a fairly long time, I think it was a long time anyway, 16 years. I've done a deployment or completed a deployment within 2 years of getting to the battalion and deployed for the rest of the time while I was there. So there was a large gap, or there was a long period of time from my first deployment to my last deployment. So I've seen how Australians, the military, people in general, adapted to service people going overseas and coming back, and how they were treated. So when I first deployed in Timor, there was not that much in terms of a psychological debriefing. So there was psychological debriefings. It was, exactly that. There was army psychologists there to sort of interview you and debrief you before you went back to Australia. On my first deployment, but it was about a 10-minute interview. Hello, how are you? Killed anyone? No. Seen any dead bodies? Yeah, a few. Do you want to kill anyone? No, I don't really want to kill anyone. Okay, cool. You can go back to Australia. And I'm serious. That were the questions. Like that, I'm not even making it up. And in between that, you had like your sergeant in the background. There was 20 of you to go through this psychologist. You had your sergeant in the background going, look, I don't want to make you do whatever you want to do, but if you guys say no or yes to any of these questions and it takes us longer, that's less time that we've got out on the piss. So just make sure you answer right.
Yeah, I'm just saying, okay, the choice is yours. The choice is, but I'm just saying, the quicker you get crap, the quicker you get on the piss. Yeah.
So that was the first deployment. And then it goes all the way to the other end, which is in Afghanistan, where there was significant psychological debriefing. Not enough, but I think it was definitely a lot more than what there was anyway.
Okay, so mate, knowing what you know, would you do it all again?
Yeah, and I get pissed off at these people that say, "Oh, I wouldn't change a thing," you know, everything, blah blah blah. Like, there's things that have changed, but I'd definitely do it again. Yes. Where I was in life when I was leaving high school I was going nowhere fast. So for me, there was definitely a good decision.
Yeah, I'm like that. I'm like that with the coppers, and I suspect my mate Topher. I suspect my mate Topher might kind of agree, because, like, you know, PTSD is a thing in all the emergency service, including the police. What we're finding, because I've worked a bit as a peer support officer and stuff like that, so I've dug into the literature. So this is not just anecdotal, but the literature backs my anecdotal experience. What we find is it's not so much the dead bodies and all that sort of stuff, although that does matter, okay? I'm not saying that, for complete clarity, I'm not saying that doesn't matter. Yeah, of course that traumatizes people. But what really traumatizes coppers more than anything else is if they go into and something controversial happens, and almost everything we do is controversial, like, you know, somewhere, because, like, you know, if you're acting on a subject, on a person, on an alleged offender, that person, well, of course, from that person's point of view, it's bad, it's wrong, you should have done something else. Of course, their family thinks that, and if they're part of a racial group or anything else, or, you know, a church group, or whatever it is, they're going to say people get tribal. It's the way we think. You can't help it. They're going to kind of like back that up, or you can bring people in the interview. I don't mind. They kind of back that up. It's the second and third guessing that really destroys, and people going for the motivations of the coppers that just destroys them, because the image of themselves going in there of like, well, we're the good guys. We're the kind of like, not full-on warriors, not in the same sense that you guys are. Like, I'm not pretending to that level, but it's the same sort of mentality. Like, we're the good guys. We're willing to go in there. We're willing to take the hits. We're willing to do those things. And I had to do something that was terrible. And then for you to come along afterwards and say that I'm the bad person, and like that destroys the police. That seriously just destroys them. It just, because they've built this self-image of who they are. You know what I mean? And they've got a narrative in their head of the sort of person they are. And when that's challenged or not validated by other people, or even worse, if they have their colleagues going, mate, you stuffed that right up. You know, you could have or should have done something different. Or they're asking themselves, because, like, anytime, you know, we're highly accountable. So something happens, the first thing you're doing is you're sitting down with your sergeant, you know, which was kind of my role when I was finishing up. And they're kind of sitting there saying, look, tell me what happened. And if you're not validated, if they're not validated, or they tell them the stuff up, it kind of crushes them. That's what we're finding. With that. That actually leads me on to, oh, hang on, we'll see if we've got some other questions. Yeah, we are getting some questions come up, but that leads me right ahead to some stuff that I was going to kind of ask later on, but it's a bit of a segue. So, look, I kind of asked if you do it all again. Now, I think it's notwithstanding the sacrifice of lives over there. Do you think having our soldiers deployed in places, well, let's use Afghanistan specifically, because I know you've been to a couple of places. Like, is it worth it? Should our country be over there?
That is a massive, massive, massive question, of course. And it's something that I've been asked many, 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 many times. And it depends. My answer depends on the political climate at the time and what's happening in the world. So I've been deployed to 3 places, as you know, like to Timor, Afghanistan, Iraq. Well, I've been deployed to a ton of places, but they're the serious places. Should we have gone to East Timor? Yes. Should we have gone to Afghanistan? Yes. Should we have gone to Iraq? my description of Afghanistan, for example, is you walk through a village, and it could be 2021, or it could be the year 1805. You would not know. You would not know. Now, there's education levels there, and social activities or norms there that are just not right. Just not right. Women are treated terribly, blah, 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 blah. And there's levels of stuff that are not right, as in social things like families falling apart because of gross negligence by the dad, and sexual crimes being permitted amongst family members. And you look at that and you think, these people need to be educated. They need to be brought into the world and brought up to a level that is like us, because, you know, we're obviously the best, which is how we think, which is fine. But then you look at Iraq and where I was in Baghdad. Baghdad is a beautiful city, and it's populated by good people. You know, it's a first world. It was first world from what I've seen. It was a regular working country. They were secular, although people don't realise that. They were secular. You can have Catholics, you can have Muslims, you can have whoever there. You're not as respected, but you're allowed to practice what you preach. You look at a place like that and you think, well, do we have a place in there? Do we have any role in going in there and telling those people how to live? I don't think we do. Although democracy is great, they've been working without it for the last 40 years. Why do we think we can do better?
Yeah. I really, really appreciate your candor. And so and I just want to kind of make sure that I've got this right in my head. East Timor, definite yes. Unqualified. What's your rationale behind that? Backing the allies, sort of thing, backing an old ally, or, you know?
No, not necessarily. It was just sticking up for the small guy. There's a country that wanted to be at peace and go about their business as they wished, and there was a larger country stopping them. So that's not right, obviously.
Right. I'm going to ask this question separately, and the reason is because I kind of it is linked, because it leads directly in, because it's actually about values, and I think it's rational to make a split between this stuff. Is our country worth defending? And I know it's a weird question to ask a soldier, but the question as to whether or not being involved in wars in the Middle East contributes to the aim of defending the country and our values, like, totally, I actually agree with pretty much everything you said. But, like, we're actually fighting an internal war right now. Really, there's a massive cultural war going on in Australia, and there are large amounts of people who are saying not just that Australia should not be defended, but it should be torn down and rebuilt in a totally different image to the. And I understand you're an atheist, but you know, Judeo-Christian morals is the kind of things that we're talking about. That's what you were talking about there before. You know, you don't have to believe in the God part of stuff to accept the morals. Democracy and capitalism. These are values that we're shedding blood for overseas. The police were kind of like, because I suppose I'm linking this to Black Lives Matter and all these other issues. In my head, at least, that's what's kind of happening, because there is a serious attack on Australia as a nation internally. And if it's worth fighting externally for, do you think these values are worth, and I don't mean, when I say fighting, for complete clarity, so if people over there are going to say he's advocating violence, I'm not. Like, I mean fighting these battles in the political sphere, fighting them intellectually, so like here, writing articles and having discussions. You think this country is worth fighting for, the values that we stand for and the things we hold up for?
There's only ever one answer you're going to get out of that, Matt.
But see, like, I don't know, because I've actually met, and to put further context in that question, I was really good. Oh, actually, just had one person say, look, thank you very much for your service. So, look, thank you very much, Maxine. So Maxine Renouf has said that. So,
Renouf, that's a good Maltese name.
it is. It is. I love the Maltese. I got, yeah. Anyway, I got some Maltese relatives too. Anyway, I was really good friends with a World War II vet who was a decorated soldier. Guy was a dead set legend. Fought the Japanese, got wounded, went back and all that sort of stuff. I was having beers with him, and it wasn't even an Anzac Day. And we were talking about, because I love war stories. I absolutely love them, and to get into the mind of these guys that, did these amazing things and lived through these incredible time. And, I was saying, I think you did a great job. And of course, it's all worth it. And he got really dismissive. He said, I don't think it was. I nearly fell off my chair. Like, this is a guy who literally took a bullet for the country and would celebrate Anzac Day every day. He goes, I don't think it's worth it. And I went, why? He goes, I just don't. He become a firm communist. He kind of was very left wing before the war, and he'd become a committed communist after the war. And he said, look, I'd kind of just want to reinstate, I would have liked to have won the war and completely have just rewritten society. I wanted to regenerate it in a way. And he actually started off, ironically too, considering his loathing of totalitarianism. He was a great fan of Stalin. He was kind of even half pro-Vietnam. And this guy was a World War II vet. So that's, to put that in context, that's why I kind of asked it. Needless to say, I kind of disagreed. And, one of the reasons I joined the police was because I saw myself, because it was peacetime. Like, I'm coming on 50 now, so I'm considerably older. And I did actually apply to the army, and the coppers just got back to me sooner. That's the only reason I ended up in blue rather than green. And that's something actually I've got to say I'm really thankful for. But I saw myself, and I still see myself in the line of those people that were like, well, you know what? We're going to defend these institutions. They're worth dying for. They're worth killing for. They're worth shedding blood for. They're worth shedding treasure for. You know what? Yeah, it's worth it. And to have that validated, I got to say, is a bit of a big deal.
Yeah, there's no doubt that I think it's worth it, but I think on a day-to-day level, the job that we were doing there amongst peers, it wasn't like this is worth it, we're saving the world, blah, blah, blah. We're doing a good job, basically, just so we make sure we can look after a mate. You're not, at least when I went overseas, I wasn't going over to save the world. I was going over there to come back with all my mates, and everyone would be safe and everyone would be happy.
But that's not necessarily world saving, but that's still like a higher mission. It's something greater than oneself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
With the police, I didn't see myself as a world saver, but I did see myself as defending the community. I still do.
Yeah.
I still do. I still believe that. 30 years of considerable experience has not changed that opinion. But look, can we talk about the Brereton report?
Oh, yes. Yep.
All right. So look, I haven't read the full Brereton report, okay, so for complete discussion, but I have read the reports of the allegations. I'm going to show that now. So this is where to find it, people. This is what I've read, and I've read all of it. And fundamentally, these are the allegations. So this is where you can find it, Parliament of Australia. You'll see it up there. These are the allegations that the Brereton report is based on. It goes from allegation 1 right down to, I think there's a total of, 40 odd. 52. There we go. There's even more than that. But one of the findings of the Brereton report was that there's an unchecked warrior culture. So I'm happy for you to talk about the Brereton report generally, or this unchecked warrior culture, or both.
Firstly, I'd like to say that I've never been to the level of what these soldiers are. These soldiers are tier 1 operators, so they're special forces. They're the without sounding cliche or bullshit, they're the best of the best, and they're very, very good at what they do. I know there's been allegations and there's certain wrongdoings, warrior culture and that sort of thing. And I'm not saying it didn't happen, but there is a certain sort of culture that you need to build into a group of people to do what they do. You can't be, I don't care who you are, you can't observe the norms and the rules and all the ins and outs of being great and normal and what have you without breaking a few eggs. I don't know if that made any sense whatsoever, but these guys are employed to do a terrible job, and they're doing that job. And I'm sure there was all of these people going into it meant the right things, and I'm sure that some bad things perhaps may have happened, but I don't think it's up to any one of us to judge what happened there.
No, and I'm of that opinion. I've got to say, having read all of those allegations, and again, this is just my subjective opinion, all right? And I would never presume, because there are some. I've actually spoken to some soldiers who kind of like, well, one of them was a very high-ranking officer who served over there, and he was like, well, Matt, you kind of don't know what you're talking about. No, those guys needed to be. That's fine. Again, I would never presume to tell that man who himself was highly decorated. I would never presume to challenge him. But from what I've seen over there, from what I've seen from that report, it's real fog of war sort of stuff. Like, there's only a couple of allegations of outright executions, which would be homicides even as defined by the rules of war sort of stuff. The rest of it seems to be fog of war sort of material. It's like, yeah, they shot a guy. Maybe they were a little bit too quick on the trigger. They weren't sure who he was. Turns out that there were non-combatants in the room. Turns out that there were, like, and I know what it's like. Like, I don't know what it's like to be in combat. Okay, I'm not saying that. I'm not presuming that, but I know what it's like to be in a confusing situation where you don't know who your enemies are, who your friends are. You're not even really sure of where you are, which way you should be pointing, and then to have to make some really, really quick decisions at the time. Like, I've been lucky I've got 30 years in the job, and people have only actually actively tried to kill me 3 times, which is really good. Like, honestly, like that's a bad day in Afghanistan, and some of the LAPD guys I know, that's a bad shift. Like, and those ones, because, we didn't have to charge anyone with attempted murder or anything like that. It was just like, it was a situation where I got to the knife quicker or something like that happened, and they paid in court later on with the charges that that were given. But it's no picnic out there. And I think when I see a lot of the protests online, some of it is just armchair expert idiots who like have watched way too many movies and like, why didn't you shoot the gun out of their hand? Sort of like yeah. You're delusional. And people saying that incidentally about the military, it's not just the cops. Like, because there's this conflation of, and fundamentally what it comes right down to, I think, I'd be really interested in your comment on this, is a number of things. First, we're doing all this in the names of the civilians out there. And a lot of them, they don't want blood on their hands, they kind of like, they don't want to know that there are people there are strong men who have very different value sets to them, doing violence on their behalf to keep them safe while they sleep. They don't want to know that. You know what I mean? They seriously don't want to know that. And then to know that these guys are actually doing like seriously violent things, people, and there are incidental casualties and stuff like that. They don't want that on their conscience, because we're telling them, like, this is what we did at Anzac Day yesterday. We're doing this for you. We're doing this for you. We're doing this for you. Well, some of them turn around and go, you know what? I don't want you to do that for me. I don't want that to happen. And that's a conflict of values. Like, that comes back to the question I asked before as to, where are we going as a nation? Like, we might very well celebrate Anzac Day, but are we celebrating the values behind it? Like, there are serious kind of pushes with that. I feel like we're all in this massive conflict, and there is a distinct questioning. I think part of the Brereton report, there were some, for complete clarity, I think there were some legitimate things there that need to be investigated by appropriate authorities who have an understanding of what it's like to be in combat zone. So that's not me. That's not anyone in the AFP, unless they've been in the military or anything else. That's not anyone else. That's for like, okay, we're soldiers. that's acceptable. That's not. That's, that's fine. But I think a lot of it was just stuff thrown around by the ABC and everyone else who just doing the not in my name thing. And they had another agenda. They don't think that our society is worth defending. There's a lot of people who genuinely kind of think that, and it concerns the hell out of me.
Mm. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. What is it to, if you're part of a society that isn't worth defending, what society are you part of? Like, yeah, that's a strange thought to me anyway.
But all right. Hang on, I've just got a couple of other questions and I'm going to kind of flick through that. I might read out some of the so look, some of the questions here. There are some Australians, Mr. Bates is on. There are some Australians who would be happy to sell out our national values. And sometimes, one of the comments that's been made is that sometimes you have to become a monster to kill monsters. I actually discussed that in one of the other interviews. It's funny that Chris brought that up. And we got someone saying we don't celebrate Anzac Day enough, or we don't celebrate Anzac. So I kind of agree with that. All right, a question. Besides Rob's health, family, home, bank balance, etc., what was his best or the best thing that he took out of the ADF? So there's a couple of characteristics there. The friendship, the understanding of the human condition. Is there a memory or something like that you've taken away from there?
Oh, look, that's a really good question. I don't think there's a single thing that I can say I've taken out of there, like one in particular. It's just the military gave me purpose. It just made, I don't know, it's really hard to put into words, but it gave me purpose, and it gave me a way to approach each problem in life and sort of resolve it to a satisfactory degree. I don't know, the way in which I live my life now is always going to be backed by problem solving that I've learned in the military. It's just the way it is. And it's not bad problem solving. It's not robotic. It's not they turn me into, some sort of robot that doesn't know the wrongs and rights and blah, blah, blah. But that's sort of what I've taken out of it. The approach to any problem is sort of backed by my military experience, and it doesn't matter whether it's how do I get that can off the top shelf or some more significant problem. Everything is sort of governed by the way I was taught in the military.
No, look, you actually did articulate that well, and for me the word that stuck most in my mind was purpose. And that's what people are kind of seeking. Like when you have a society that, not that we're too comfortable, if you have too many people in a society that's arguably a little bit too comfortable, they lack purpose. And people seek that. Like that's psychological. Jordan Peterson talks about it all the time, and we're starting to become more aware of it. Carl Jung talked about it. Purpose is the main kind of thing that we need. Nietzsche talked about it too, with that, you would destroy, if human beings lived in a perfect world, the first thing they'd do is destroy it to give themselves something to do. Purpose is so important.
Mm-hmm.
It's what we do. But all right, mate, tell me about forming Mates for Mates.
So that was a little bit out of left field. So I was separating from the military, and I had a couple of friends that I served with, Paul Warren, Phil Thompson, that were in Mates for Mates down in Townsville. And they mentioned to me that there was a position coming up in Cairns to sort of establish this charity for ex-service people. And I took it on board and started doing it. It was quite good, but there were problems, I guess. You have problems with any charity, I guess.
Okay. And so what's the mainstay of the work? Is it
maintenance?
Yeah. So
purpose, it comes down to that purpose thing again. It's identifying people that may be having psychological issues or physical issues that as a result of their service, that they need that need attention, and mates sort of facilitates that. And I think the biggest thing that they facilitated is interaction and purpose, giving people purpose.
It's such a big deal, and I would imagine coming out of that culture too, of a culture of like being, a close knit bunch of, the police haven't got it to that degree, but like, the brotherhood, although it's disintegrating now, it's one of the reasons I'm kind of like easing out. But mate, the brotherhood was real, and when I say the brotherhood, I know there's a lot of female police officers listening. I mean you too, sisters. When I say the brotherhood, I mean that in a totally non-sexist way, and it's true. Like there is that real camaraderie. And that's one thing I miss. I seriously miss that, and that cultural thing, that being able to sit around with people and just being totally comfortable. Like they don't care that you fart. They don't care that your breath is bad because both of you have had a bad shift or whatever it is. You've been drinking too much coffee. They don't care that you say some off-collar remark that they may or may not agree with. They don't care. They're not these super sensitive, offended. People just get offended because you're tiptoeing around all the time. I miss that so much.
You know what? Your colleagues would accept that, and because you've been through lows and highs with them, they know exactly how you're going to react before you react, because they've known you for so long. And that is a massive, massive thing to miss. And I agree wholeheartedly. It's a tough thing.
Yeah. And that but it kind of links back to, there's a clear desire to change the culture in the military, which I kind of think is odd. I don't even know what the Brereton report meant when they said this unchecked warrior culture. What does it even mean? What sort of culture do you want to have? A culture of, I don't know, ice cream vendors? Social workers? What do you want? It's not that ice cream vendors and social workers don't have their place. They most certainly do. They're both actually kind of important jobs, but maybe not in the military. Mate, are you willing to talk about culture and frame it around former Lieutenant General Morrison and the issues he believes should have been priorities for the military? Because he had some pretty...
Yeah, just refresh us with what his policies were.
He was Lieutenant General Morrison was the...
Sorry, just to be clear, I know him quite well. I was given a citation by him personally in Afghanistan. Okay. I thought he was quite a good general, but I know there was a lot of problems that came up from some of the stuff he said.
Well, yeah, and basically it's from the talk that I've heard from some of the RSL, but if you're not familiar with it, rather than me paraphrase and get things wrong, I'm just going on second because I did have some of the guys at the RSL and they know who they are. Go asking this and asking this, and I was like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not familiar with the consensus down there, it perhaps would be best for me to shut the hell up.
No, let's have it. Sounds meaty.
Well, okay, I'll
Is it was a sexist thing, right? Like females in the military?
No, not just that. There's a lot of kind of things. Okay, I'm paraphrasing, and this is my understanding, and I'm kind of scared to say this, but he wanted to introduce a lot of what people thought were civilian values into the military. The kind of thing that we're talking about before. Oh my God, I'm so offended, and you can't say that. The specific thing that he's kind of famous for is saying guys. He didn't like people using the word guys.
Yeah.
That was
thing. I think David Morrison was really had a really good idea and had a good intentions, but used some of the poor principles to bring him about.
Yeah. Again, I'm not in a position to say, and I'm just checking some of the questions there. But look, mate, we've hit the hour.
Mm-hmm.
We are coming.
Feels like we just started.
Sorry?
Feels like we just started.
I know, and that's always, I've got to say, that's the sign of a really good interview, when it's kind of absolutely flowing past. But I'm pretty sure that I've covered off. Actually, it's one of the things we talked about before when I mentioned my friend from the Second World War. God rest his soul. When we talk about veterans, we talk about it's like this. It's the same for the service people of all wars. It's kind of not, is it?
No, not at all. Why would it be? Each conflict's framed in a certain period of time, and that period of time is separated by every other conflict from a period of time. So there are always going to be different conflicts and reasons why they occur, I guess. Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah, well, it's kind of like, yeah, basically. And, you know, I kind of think about what the, you know, a lot of the Vietnam veterans are still, I'm pretty well acquainted with Les Hiddens, the Bush Tucker man. And
I know Les, he's a good fella.
Mate, he's a legend, though. He's a dead set legend. I really enjoy his company.
Hates drinking beer.
Oh, yeah, loathes it. Yeah, almost as much as I do. And, but like through him, I've met a couple of the other Vietnam guys, and there still is understandably a degree of bitterness, you know, in the way that they were kind of treated when they got back. And some of them, there has been a broad consensus. Like I've spoken to some of the Vietnam guys that said, you know, in hindsight, okay, like I did my duty, no problems. I did what I was told, no guilt. But like, I kind of don't think, and now that they've seen that, you know, Vietnam has pretty much given up, although it's still technically a communist government, it's kind of given that up, and it looks like it's going to normalize sooner or later. You know, that system simply doesn't work. So, you know, one of the guys kind of said, you know, it probably wasn't, maybe an isolate and contain situation might have been better. I've heard some of the other guys going, no, you know what, it was definitely worth it. I had a really interesting conversation with a Korean War vet, and one of my teachers was a Korean War vet. And he brought up his phone when I was chatting with him. And there's this, and it's a magnificent image. I wish I could kind of, I'll try and look it up and put it on the chat site afterwards. But it's this photograph of North Korea and South Korea. And South Korea is like full of lights. Like it's all lit up.
Yes, I've seen this picture.
And the North Korea is like, except for like a couple of places, it's literally in darkness at night. And he said, Matt, yeah. He goes, you know, some of my friends are still over there. They're never coming back. He goes, there's a bit of me over there that's, you know, and he meant that mentally, that's never coming back. Like part of me has never left that country, never will. But yeah, no, it was worth it. So it's really kind of, it's really kind of funny when we talk about the veteran community. It's as if it's one, and it's not. You've got all these different wars, and you've got different perspectives on whether or not it was kind of like worth it.
And that's actually a big thing amongst veterans at the moment, Matt. And I find this a particular issue because I'm on the RSL board here in Cairns. The difference between, we call them young and old veterans. I don't think that's a good term. I think veterans are veterans. That's their descriptor. But yeah, there's a massive disparity between younger veterans and older veterans. When younger veterans try to say join the RSL or something, it's like you said, no conflicts the same, so it's hard to sort of draw parallels. And some, you know, there's always the older blokes going, "Oh, we did it harder," and all this sort of thing. You know, and you're like, "Oh, maybe you didn't, maybe you didn't. I don't know. You could be bullshitting."
I broke up a fight in the Winton RSL. It was my second station, and I had the day off
in Winton.
Yeah, Winton. No, say it's West Queensland. You got to say it to your name. It's Winton.
Winton.
Oh yeah, that's it. Winton. Yeah. So, bro, mate, I was out there, and I always took RS because you know I love war stories and knocking around with the guys out there, and there was a bloke who was a dead set legend. He was with the 9th, so he'd seen action at Tobruk, and then come back and fought in Papua in Papua New Guinea, and he was talking to one of the Vietnam guys who had done some ridiculous amounts of tours and seen some of the really serious battles over there. And it was on the boozers, like, and it got to like, no, it was tougher here. No, you wouldn't know. And mate, they ended up dead set. And this is in the early 90s. So the World War II vet would have been in his late 60s, you know, at least, if not early kind of 70s. And this Vietnam guy would have been like my age now, in his 50s.
And he's thinking, I'm not afraid to knock an old man out.
Yeah, well, we're going to knock each other out. But it was like that, you know, it was funny and sad at the same time. They ended up mates again later. I was like, I'm sorry, mate, I was just pissed, you know. But look, I'm going to use the royal we here. Look, what can we, and by the royal we, I mean community, institutions, churches, companies, government, what can we do to support veterans? Like, is there something a little bit more that we can?
Shit, that's a massive question too. I don't know. But I always felt like through Mates when I was sort of canvassing for charity and whatever, the Australian community as a whole is super, 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 super supportive to veterans. I just don't think they're fully aware of the ups and downs or ins and outs of what a veteran experiences. I think that's one of the downfalls of society and veterans when they come back. But Australians in general are fantastic and super receptive to service people.
Yeah, and I'm glad you could find a job. Linking it back to that conversation I had with that magnificent young Marine lieutenant. He said, "Oh, thank you for your service, but they won't give me a goddamn job when I get home." So I kind of find it reassuring that that's not the case over here. Look, mate, on that, we might actually hang on. I'll check the questions. Okay, we've got Jay Whitty saying thank you very much for your service. He's yeah, I know who that is. He's joined the Coppers, but comes from a military family. Again, you get that ethic of service, you know. And yeah, there's a few other comments there. Thank you very much for your service, commemorating Anzac Day. So that's fantastic. But look, thank you to everybody who has commented. It's fantastic to see you on there. Please don't hesitate to tell us where you're from. If you've got any further questions, put them on, and even if we don't get time, I'll put them to Rob later, and he'll probably get in contact with you. If you need or want the services of Mates for Mates, jump on the website. I understand there's great links for the RSL and stuff like that too. So there's going to be a lot of veterans who are kind of watching this. Seriously, thank you very much for your service, guys. Like, and you're getting a lot of love there. Your efforts have not gone unknown and appreciated. And incidentally, I just want to specifically mention it doesn't just go out to the soldiers who've seen frontline combat too, because it's you know, everyone who's been in any sort of, you know, support role. I got a mate in logistics, and he always used to really get angry. He goes, "Man, we never get the love that those guys do, but without us, those guys aren't going anywhere." You know what I mean? You're eating nothing. So seriously, you know, anyone involved in those sorts of roles, mate, if you're an admin, if you're a pay clerk, making sure the guys get paid, you're doing an important job, you know. So
and need money.
Damn right, and probably more, and good food. So if you're a cook, whatever.
Yeah.
All of those roles matter. So, you know, we always talk about the combat side of things, but if you're involved in any of that administrative or any of that logistics side of things, your role is really, really important. And don't think that signals, you know, don't think that that's going unnoticed or unappreciated.
Full disclosure, just quickly, Matt. For my last couple of years of service, I transferred over to rail. So I was a QE in logistics. So my first 14 years was spent as an infantryman, but I transferred over to logistics, and I can support your friend's viewpoint. They are very important.
Damn right. Like, going nowhere. This mate.
Going nowhere.
Yeah, he was a captain when he finished up.
Nowhere.
So look, it's fantastic. We're getting a lot of love on the listeners. Please like and share. Obviously, Northern Vibe. We're still just going through Facebook. I know I say this all the time. I promise we are going to fix it up. I'm going to get it. I'm going to get these interviews on YouTube. It is happening. The website is up. I'm slowly editing and putting stuff across as soon as I can, but I'm volunteering, kind of doing it by myself. That is happening. But like and share. If you're in a veteran group or you're in any other Facebook website, any other Facebook pages that would be interested in this, make sure that you share it to that and make a little comment saying, you know, well worth doing it, well worth the watch, because that's the way that we kind of get people there. Next week's guest is Paul Brumall. He's a martial arts legend, and he's an ex-police officer who he was kind of like, his main job was doing use of force. So he would like look at besides applying force himself and teaching police how to do it, he would be in the position to kind of say, yeah, this was lawful, this was acceptable, this is not. So that's going to be a very interesting conversation, especially considering the times we're living in, where there's people asking a lot of questions as to what's a acceptable use of police force in a certain circumstance and what isn't. So if you're interested in learning how to, from the martial arts side of stuff, because he's right into karate, and he's going to, I know I'm not going to be able to get him to shut up about that. He's going to talk about that a lot. So if you want to learn how to kick people's heads in and join his karate group, do that, as well as listening to one of the Queensland's leading experts on use of force. Rob, again, thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much to all the listeners. I'll get you to stay online, Rob, but we're going to end the interview there.